Hi everyone, welcome to the third and final week of the OpenTrails course. We are so excited to be here with you today. We have a jam-packed schedule full of things. We may be sort of going quickly through today. If you can't tell, I'm a little bit sick, so if my voice cracks or if I have a coughing fit, I apologize. It's nothing to do with you. And I've heard you can't get sick through the computer, so I'm sure that y'all will be okay. So without further ado, we'll go ahead and get started. If you haven't yet, if you're brand new to Slack, be sure to pop in there, say hello, tell your fellow Slack goers that, introduce yourself. Okay, so welcome to the OpenTrails course week 3. We have, over the last couple of weeks, we talked a little bit about the beginning. We started with an overview of the OpenTrails specification, how it came to be, and how we got to this point, walked through the spec a little bit and the reasons that it exists and its use cases. Last week we did a more thorough walkthrough of the conversion, what it means to convert your data, and what you might need to do to convert your data. And then over this past week we asked you to send us your data. We went through it. We sent you back some recommendations. If you haven't received those recommendations yet, rest assured that they're coming. It's probably just because we received your data a little bit later in the queue. But thanks for joining us today. Be sure to say hi to everyone on Slack. If you're new to Slack, introduce yourself, like I said. It's a great way to communicate and stay in touch with all the people who you've met through this course who are also going through the process of converting their trail data. So today is sort of the wrap up of the main me lecturing at you part of the course. First, we'll talk about some more tips and tricks for data conversion. We've received a lot of questions from you this week, which is awesome because it means you've actually been trying to convert your data or prepare your data for conversion. And that's great. Makes me happy. So sorry, hang on just one second, having a little bit of a technical glitch. Okay, I think we're good right now. So the second thing we're going to talk about today is what you can do with your OpenTrails data. I'm getting some messages that maybe my audio is cutting in and out, so if you are having trouble hearing me, just write in Slack, and Ryan or Jeremy or Alan will let me know, and I can make sure to adjust and keep everything, keep it so you can hear me. So just stepping back, first we'll talk about some more tips and tricks for data conversion. Secondly, we'll talk about what you can do with your OpenTrails data once you get it converted. And there's a lot of cool stuff there. This is the real reason we're doing this, right, is to convert and then actually do cool stuff with the data. And then third, we'll talk about how you can keep your data useful and up to date, which is really important. If we're going to be publishing open data, we want to make sure that it stays up to date so that the people who are using it, ultimately your visitors and your trail goers, are able to use it and rely on it in whatever application it ends up. So yes, today is the last day of the course, but next week at the same time we'll have office hours. I know it's the Wednesday before Thanksgiving, so some of you may not be around, but if you are around, we'll have office hours next week. We won't be doing a presentation or a webinar. We'll just have Slack, but we'll be there to answer any questions you might have or and help you through any other parts of the data conversion process. And Slack will be there perpetually. You'll still have access to it no matter what. You can hop on any time and ask questions, even outside of next week's office hours. Just next week is the time when we know we'll be sitting there at the computer waiting for your questions and comments and working specifically with you. But if you leave questions in Slack, they're there perpetually and we'll be able to answer them at any time. So without further ado, let's get started with our slides for today. First, we're going to talk about data conversion tips and tricks. There's been some confusion because it is a little bit complicated converting data. There's been some confusion about what does need to be included, what doesn't, and there's some common stumbling blocks. One of those stumbling blocks is the concept of a unique ID, and this is a little bit abstract when considering when you're using GIS. Typically, an ID is assigned to your data sets, but in this case, we want to make sure that our IDs are perpetual, and we want to make sure that we can remember them. So the idea of a unique ID is that it is perpetually tied to the feature that it identifies, so that in the future you always know that trail segment A1 is going to be referring to the same trail segment no matter what. So when you update your data, it stays consistent. The ID scheme should also be easy to maintain internally. And last week, we suggested a scheme involving a URL and a trail name, or trail segment name, or whatnot. And that, after some discussion, we've sort of realized that that's maybe not the best way to go about it. We want to leave it up to you and your agency to determine what is best for you in terms of an internal naming scheme for your trail segments and trailheads. Excuse me. Ultimately, there are a lot of different people who touch your trail data, and you want to make sure that whatever scheme you use is easy for the people who are touching the data to understand. Another common question that people had about their data was trail use fields. It seems that every data set we've looked at has a slightly different scheme for managing trail use, whether that's having separate columns for hiking, biking, motor vehicles, etc., or all in one use column that has comma-separated values. And in some cases, it's coded, so there's a use field and then there's a coded response that has some sort of meaning externally listed elsewhere. Ultimately, trail use information is important for your end users, who are your trail visitors and trail goers. They're the ones who need to know, can I bike on this trail? And for the applications that we're going to suggest that you use, as well as any other application anyone chooses to build in the future based on OpenTrails data, that this will be, it's important that we have trail use information that's accurate and up to date. So it's possible that you may need to combine data sets to get trail use information. And that is, excuse me, so look, for example, if you do have a coded trail data set or trail use data set, then you may need to combine that. But we can help you with that as needed. So let us know if you need help making that conversion or understanding what an acceptable trail use field or fields look like. This is also an advantage of managing your OpenTrails data separately from your internal processes. If you are using a very specific scheme internally for trail use data, then having a separate OpenTrails shapefile data set is really beneficial because you don't have to change up your internal processes at all. You just have to combine certain fields and rename them, and then you can keep that data separately from your internal trail data management. And so that's definitely an advantage of doing it that way, is you don't have to get the whole department on board with changing the way that you manage things. You can just keep all of that information separately. We'll get into that a little more in a bit when we start to talk about what you can do with your trail data, which would be now. Let's talk about using OpenTrails data. Once you've got your data converted and you have an acceptable OpenTrails data set, then is when you can start playing with some of the cool tools that are available to you for OpenTrails. So first of all, the best one, most important, special one is you can put it on a map. We all love maps. We're big map dorks. So the first, best, most awesome thing you can do for your visitors is to put your data on a web map. And there's a great way that you can do that, which is a tool called Outer Spatial. Outer Spatial is a tool that was created by the folks at Trailhead Labs, Jeremy and Ryan, who you're probably talking to on Slack. And Outer Spatial is a way for you to manage and display and maintain your OpenTrails data. And it's pretty easy to get it set up. Outer Spatial is a pretty simple walkthrough process, especially for the folks in this class. So I'll just walk through really quickly. Step one is to go to outerspatial.com and click on the Welcome OpenTrails Students, which is the second thing on the page. Third, sign up for Outer Spatial. In the version of, for some reason they're not showing up, but there's a version of these slides that include images that show screenshots of doing this, it up. Number 4 is to upload your zipped OpenTrails data, and then boom, you can see your data on an interactive map, like this one of Sugar Land, Texas, that you can see here. And it shows the trailheads and your trails, and you can also download data and search specifically by trail name. Apologies that that screenshot didn't show up there, but when we send out these slides, we'll have screenshots of walking through that process for you. The other cool thing about the OpenTrails map is that it's embeddable. You can take that map, or excuse me, the Outer Spatial map. You can take that map, you can embed it in a page, and put it on your own website, which is super neat and exciting that you can just like integrate it seamlessly into your own existing website. So Outer Spatial is also cool because it defaults to open. Once you put your data on Outer Spatial, then all of a sudden it's magical open data. Anyone can access it, which is exactly the whole point. Having OpenTrails data is great because you can put it out to the public and then people can take it and consume it in applications, but also if folks want to build other applications on your data, if other people in-house want to build applications, that's something that you can totally do. And then that same data can be used in mobile applications like To the Trails and OpenTrails Mobile. To the Trails was the application that the Summit County team built last year for Summit County, Ohio, that shows different, excuse me, that shows different trails in your area, and it's a web application that you can use to navigate trails when you're out in the field. And OpenTrails Mobile is another simplification. It should be noted that To the Trails consumes an older version of the OpenTrails specification, although we're moving to make To the Trails consume the newest version of the specification. OpenTrails Mobile is a product that you can use in your own area. You can set up your own individual mobile application for your trails, or you can add your data to a larger OpenTrails mobile application. And either way, if you're interested in adding your data or making a mobile trails application specific to your region, you can contact Trailhead Labs and they'll help you get set up with that. It's really awesome to be able to provide to your visitors a cool application that shows your data that they can just use right from their pocket. So this is a great thing that you can do with your OpenTrails data. What else can you do? One thing you can do is you can provide your data as open data, and that is straight up a file download. And that can be as simple as taking your zip file and putting it on a page where someone can download it. And you can put it on an open data portal if your city or region has an open data portal that is being used. And if you're interested in learning more about open data portals, be sure to write in Slack and we can talk a little bit more about what that might look like. Another cool thing that you can do with your trail data is share it with other agencies, other neighboring agencies especially. Building regional trail maps and understanding your regional trail network as it is connected instead of as separate between a bunch of different jurisdictions is a huge deal. Because a data standard means interoperability. So you can create regional data sets from your OpenTrails data and build network-wide trail maps. Once you have everyone in your area all using OpenTrails, then getting your data connected is a breeze, and no more of those misses when you do an epically large join, as you might with a bunch of different types of data, or a bunch of different data sets from different jurisdictions. A quick note on publishing data, because what we're doing ultimately when we're putting it on a map or when we're putting it online is we're publishing our OpenTrails data, is that metadata is really important. Metadata, as you know, is the data that goes along with your data to say when it was updated, what it is, who made it, etc. Excuse me. And so, and I'm sure you're all familiar with metadata from other data sets that you do use internally. But metadata doesn't have to be super complicated. It's really quite simple if you just think about it in terms of its very basic features. So for example, this is an example from Alan Williams of what some minimally viable metadata might look like. It includes a link to the OpenTrails specification, basically what model are you going off of to publish your data, and what, the specific schema. It includes the specification version, which would be 1.1, the date that you published your data, how often you're planning on updating it, information about the point of contact, and then a description of any changes that have been made to the data set since the last time it was updated. And this is good practice for any data that you're publishing, but especially for your OpenTrails data, considering that one of its main focuses is interoperability. And metadata is helpful for both trail goers, the people who are actually going to be visiting your parks and your trails, and then also for the other people who are using and maintaining the data. And that includes people who are developing applications, maintaining applications, park staff, anyone in your office or regional offices that are nearby. Having metadata is really helpful for those groups of people. And that brings us to sustainability plans. First, let's just take a moment to admire this beautiful picture of Yellowstone National Park. I've never been there myself, but I would really like to go. If any of you have been to Yellowstone, I want to hear all about your adventures there because it sounds amazing. So a sustainability plan is all about who is going to manage the data and how it's going to be collected and updated. And this is just a plan moving forward as you have more or new data to be included, or if you are changing your trails around. This happens all the time, right? Like, it's not atypical for trail data to move or change. And lots of different people touch the data through the pipeline. So a sustainability plan kind of outlines those things just in case there's someone else who needs to manage updating trail data and you're not around to do it, having experienced this course. Right now, publishing OpenTrails is a one-way process. It's not a continuous feedback loop between your OpenTrails data and your internal data processes. You have to explicitly and intentionally publish data, but that can be a good thing. Because data is only going to flow from your internal processes to the data set where it lives online when you say it does. And this gives you lots of control over the data that is being published. But in addition to good metadata, because you're controlling that flow, you want to make sure that you can keep that data useful and up to date. And that's really important for like we said, keeping your trail goers happy and the end users of your data happy. Yes, keeping it up to date is the #1 thing that you can do. If anything changes, be sure to stick to a publishing schedule and get your data updated in whatever places you put it online. That includes outer spatial or on an open data portal or wherever else you have it maintained online. Keep improving your data. You know, as you've seen in the specification, there are required fields and there are recommended fields. Data can always be improved by adding more detail to it. So improving the data can include things like replacing null values for recommended features. If you don't currently keep track of which trails are wheelchair accessible, but then all of a sudden you start keeping track of that information further down the road, that's something good that you can add to your OpenTrails data set and to improve it. Another thing would be to update and add trail names if your trail names change, or if you add new trails, or maybe some trails didn't have names before, so you gave them temporary names to be used in the OpenTrails specification. You can add those trail names as time progresses to improve your data set. Creating trailhead features. As we started out, we didn't receive trailhead data from many of the organizations that provided data for us, and you know, that's okay. It's a little bit of a new way to think about things when you start to maintain trailhead data. But as you create more trailhead data or receive that data from tools like Trail Editor, you want to continue to add that to your OpenTrails data sets and as a way to improve them. Another way is to continue associating your trailheads with trail segments. This was a recommended but not required feature of your OpenTrails data when you are publishing. But it is very important when considering how people are going to use the data and how tools like Outer Spatial will consume the data. So continue making those associations. And finally, make sure to document new trail segments and add them to the data set. Kind of goes without saying, keep your data updated. Another thing you can do is correct errors. Be sure to keep doing quality checks of the data. Hate to be a broken record, but complete, accurate data is what makes a good data set and makes a good visitor-facing product. Excuse me. Again, on the other side of the broken record, data should flow from your internal processes to OpenTrails. We don't want you to necessarily change all of your internal processes, and we also don't want your internal processes to deter you from publishing OpenTrails because it's a data set that's maintained separately. You don't need to change anything internally. That shouldn't be a roadblock for you. You just have to think about what processes you can use on top of your existing systems to continue publishing OpenTrails data. So this is just another example of that. You have your master database, you have your main place where you're keeping your data, and it's flowing to OpenTrails, and maybe OpenTrails has some additional information that you don't keep internally, but it still needs to be included in OpenTrails while using the majority of the input information from your master database. The best way to manage this is a clear process. It's a little bit confusing probably to add another piece of structure on top of your internal process, but the idea is that we don't want it to be hard. We want it to be seamless and making it really easy to publish to OpenTrails, which is why we have the converter, which is why we have other tools that can help you. But a sustainability plan is really going to help through the future at making this seamless and not just a one-time deal. So a sustainability plan outlines everyone who touches the OpenTrails data and their roles in publishing and maintaining it. And this is to say everyone from upstream in the process. You have GIS analysts, you have park managers, you have the people sort of at the top who are creating and maintaining and managing that data. And that data then flows downstream to visitor-facing staff, marketing staff, communications, and ultimately trailgoers who are touching the data. So thinking about what each of those people's roles are in the process of maintaining and updating OpenTrails data. That's really important to think about in terms of making a sustainability plan. And this doesn't have to be a huge process or a huge, big, massive document. It can be as just simple as a clear outline, but just starting to think about how is this data going to be maintained, who's going to maintain it, and what do I need to do to make sure that it's useful data for everyone is extremely valuable. And these plans will vary from agency to agency. Sorry, push that quickly, but the plans will vary, and that's okay. Different people have different processes that they need to manage, so we expect those to be different, but we're glad to help you out with that. Just to recap this little section here, a sustainability plan includes a few things. It includes who is making updates upstream and how is that going to happen, who will convert the data and when and how will they convert it, an outline of how you're going to use the data, where it's going to flow to, how you're going to handle feedback downstream from visitors, from trailgoers, the people who are actually using the data. If they want to see changes, how are you going to handle that and manage that coming back up? And ultimately, you're outlining and defining your community of practitioners, the people who are going to be a part of this process, which is good because building community is important, as we'll talk about in a second. So let us know if we can help with that at all. I know this is sort of running through this quickly, but we're here to help you in whatever way that we can with building sustainability plans and keeping your data up to date. And finally, lastly, I want to talk a little bit about the OpenTrails community, which is part of what you're creating with your sustainability plan, but also what you're becoming a part of here today as you're on Slack, chatting, talking to us, and listening to these webinars. The OpenTrails community has grown quite a bit over the past year and a half since the specification kind of idea came to be, and it's getting bigger all the time. And altogether, we make the standard useful. We make it better because the data standards really don't mean anything unless you have a group of people who are caring about them and who are using them and making them better through actual use and trial by fire and seeing what works and what doesn't. So the more people who are involved in the community, the better the standard is going to be. Now, who does that include exactly? That includes people who are building applications, folks like Trailhead Labs and the great folks at Code for Portland, the Portland Code for America Brigade, who spent this year's National Day of Civic Hacking building tools and applications that consumed the OpenTrails data standard. It includes park agencies like you, the people who care about providing good data, accurate data, usable data for trailgoers and for visitors of your parks, and also for the other people in your park agencies and other neighboring park agencies who want to learn about the trail data that you manage. This also goes for the data maintainers, and that's the subset of people inside of park agencies who are actually touching and maintaining the data. And trail map users, the people who are actually using the data and the maps and the resulting products. Those are all people who are part of the OpenTrails community as well. And the community also allows you to join forces with other neighboring parks agencies. It helps you learn more about what your visitors want, sometimes even through that connection with your neighboring park agencies to build regional tools. You can stay in touch with the rest of the community with through an OpenTrails discussion list, and this list exists. Excuse me. This list exists to keep people up to date on the specification, how it's changing, what needs we need from the community, and also to share with each other what's worked, what hasn't worked, and that sort of thing over time. You can join that list by emailing opentrails-discussion@googlegroups.com, and we'll send this out again, invitations to join this discussion list, because it's really important. Another thing that you can do is stay in touch on Twitter using the OpenTrails hashtag. One other thing that I wanted to add that I didn't end up putting in the slides is there's a great website, opentraildata.org. And at opentraildata.org is sort of an aggregation of all of the OpenTrails resources and information. And we're going to try and keep that up to date as time goes on with the tools that you're building, projects, presentations, and all of the videos from this course and the previous course so that you can refer back and learn more. OpenTrails also has a place on GitHub. And GitHub is an online repository for code and projects and tools. If you're feeling savvy, you can check that out and see what's there, what you might want to use or contribute to. And again, we can help you out with all of this. Finally, there's MapTime. MapTime groups are hands-on, beginner-focused meetup groups for learning about maps and geospatial concepts, and they are our MapTime communities all around the country and the world. And if you go to this website, maptime.io, that's linked to here, you can learn more about MapTime chapters, and ultimately it's a group of people who are excited about modern geographic data and managing and maintaining it. If you're looking for people who are excited or you're looking to learn more about GeoJSON or other types of geographic data, MapTime is the place to go for that. So a good sustainability plan with identifying places to publish your data and building community around OpenTrails is really what success looks like in terms of coming out of this process. What we're trying to do is make sure that you can publish data that can be used widely, that you can make sure that it stays up to date and maintained, and that you have been building a community out of publishing this data and putting it out there for use by everyone who may want to use it. I'm sorry that I rushed through this today. Like I said, I'm not feeling super well, but we'll have plenty of time for questions. Quickly, in case you forgot who we are, my name is Lizzie. I've been the course facilitator for this course, and you can reach me, Lizzie at trailheadlabs.com and at Lizzie Diamond on Twitter. Ryan is the CEO of Trailhead Labs. He's also been chatting with you on Slack. Ryan at trailheadlabs.com and Ryan Bransford on Twitter. Jeremy is the CTO of Trailhead Labs. Jeremy at trailheadlabs.com and Jeremy Monteau on Twitter. And finally, Alan Williams, who is our lovely, wonderful spirit guide for the OpenTrails specification. He's at alanw at codeforamerica.org and Alan Joseph Willie on Twitter. Thanks so much for bearing with us as we've barreled through this course. There's a lot of information to cover, and it's a little bit complicated, but ultimately y'all did a really, really awesome job of asking questions and trying to understand what OpenTrails is for and really investing in the community and investing in your agency by bringing yourselves here. So thank you so much for that. And with 25 minutes to spare, many, we can take any questions that you might have. So this is a question from Matt and Marin. It says, if we adjoin another public landowner, our trailheads are not where our trail terminates on our land and begin on theirs, right? Trailheads are just where our trails start from private lands or communities. A trailhead, from what I understand, is anywhere where you can access the trail. Ryan or Jeremy, if one of you could hop on and answer that a little bit more concisely, that would be super awesome.
Yeah, that's right, Lizzie. This is Ryan at Trailhead Labs. So basically, a trailhead, it represents an access point onto a trail. So think about it from the visitor perspective of where a visitor would be sort of getting on the trail. So from a road, from a parking lot, from outside the park to inside the park.
Okay. I hope, Matt, that answered your question a little bit. And I saw that I hope you all saw, we sent out the Golden Gate National Parks Association data and their resulting map, which I feel like they've done a really nice job, and they have some great data, so that's a really nice example. And I also see here in Slack that Ryan put in a link to the OpenTrails mobile app, which is free, and you can go and check that out and see if that's something that you'd be more interested in. I see also that there is a question about topology and routing from Nick. The current OpenTrails specification does not do a very it doesn't explicitly require topological consistency at this point. I think it's something that we've received enough comments about that we want to include in the future. But so OpenTrails is currently at version 1.1 of the specification, and it's frozen for a small bit while people can learn to adopt it, and we can learn more about what people want from the specification. And the OpenTrails 2.0 specification will be open for comment in spring 2015. Again, if you join that mailing list, the OpenTrails discussion list, you'll be able to hear more about the OpenTrails data specification changes and be able to provide comment. And from what I understand, the proponents of the specification didn't necessarily want there to be too many barriers to adoption in the early life of the specification. Topological consistency is something that makes it really difficult to be interoperable with other agencies, because you have to make sure that your trail networks are 100% topologically consistent, and that is something that is important and valuable, absolutely. But as far as early adoption, it made more sense to made more sense to leave that off for the moment. Another question from Nick, is it okay to have empty values in a field? For example, if we have a ski field in our schema, do we have to enter no for each segment? And the answer is no, you don't. It is okay to have empty values in a field. Your trail use information is a recommended addition to, or a recommended field in the OpenTrails specification. And the converter, if it doesn't have any data for it, will create null values for those fields. One of the things we mentioned here in terms of improving your data is moving forward. If you don't have, or if you do, let's say in the future, decide that you are going to keep track of skiing, whether or not a trail is acceptable for skiing, then you can add that to your data to remove some of those null values. I hope that made sense. Ryan is saying now, and this is a good point, that like if you can do the work to do a nice field calculation and put no in all of those fields as opposed to null, it will be valuable for trail goers. The converter is lenient, but the trail goer would much rather know about whether or not something explicitly is acceptable. I see a question here about aggregating data. The question is, has Trailhead Labs thought about working with GreenInfo or others to create a Bay Area-wide data set? Having an aggregated data set, and I'm going to leave that question to Ryan or Jeremy to answer if that is the plan that they have.
Hey, Lizzie, thanks. This is Ryan, and thanks for the question, Matt. Yeah, that's a really good point. It's something we've been talking about with GreenInfo and others. We've worked a lot with GreenInfo in the past, and for those of you on the call that aren't familiar, they aggregate a database on protected lands for the Bay Area and also for California, and they're working on sort of a national data set with some of the some other agencies throughout the country. So yeah, we are, I mean, Outer Spatial is sort of the way that we're going to be aggregating OpenTrails data and making it available to developers via the API, and then we'll likely make it available as sort of a GIS download as well. So you can think about Outer Spatial as the way that that's going to be done, and then we can make that available to to other agencies that may want to aggregate it in different ways, like Green Info and others.
Awesome, thank you. Another question was related specifically to IDs. Matt says, we have unique IDs for every road and trail, but not per segment. And there's logic to those IDs that ties in with the management plan, so he doesn't want to change them. Can he merge his trails so that each is one segment and then convert it to OpenTrails? That's an interesting question, and I'm really not sure what the best way to go there is. Ideally, each trail segment has its own unique ID, and I'm wondering if there's a way that you can append the existing IDs to keep the original base ID consistent, and then just append a value to denote that it's a different segment of the same trail. Ultimately, right, Jeremy can jump in here too, but I think that there's a process in terms of, like, you have your managed data that you manage, then there's an intermediary shapefile that you can use to prepare for the converter, and then the converter can convert data. But Jeremy, do you want to jump in and address this?
Yeah, so the thing that I would note here is it's okay to dissolve segments down as long as those segments have the same sort of usage attributes. The important thing about segments is to sort of communicate to the park visitor that different sections of the trail may have different allowed uses, so biking, hiking, horseback riding, etc. If you do have a continuous section of trail, for example, that might be split into different segments, but you want to maintain the IDs, you can dissolve them down. It's okay as long as you're not going to lose information about different usage across that path. So that's really the key, is if you can look at your data and decide that the usage is the same across the segments, then go ahead and dissolve them down if that's convenient for you to maintain IDs. But just be aware that you do want to maintain the different segments if there are different usage across them, so that can be communicated to the park visitors properly.
Great, thank you, Jeremy. Are there any other questions? We'll wait here a second. Well, all right. If there aren't any other questions at this time, we will be on Slack in the future, and next week during office hours from 11 to noon. We'll be sure to send out all the links that we discussed, as well as the video from today and the slides from today. Thank you so much for all of your excitement and energy, and we're thrilled that y'all decided to take this course with us. Again, it goes on for another week. Feel free to email us, write in Slack. We'll see you next week on Slack from 11 to noon. Oh yeah, good point. Ryan is reminding me that we have a newsletter that he just linked to in Slack. tinyletter.com/OpenTrails allows you to sign up for the OpenTrails newsletter, and that's how you can learn more about new courses, what's going on with the specification, other cool tools and applications that people are building with OpenTrails, trail maps, so on and so on. So be sure to sign up for that, and be sure to email us, write on Slack, write on Twitter, ask us any questions, and we'll see you next week on Slack. Thanks so much, and hope y'all have a great rest of your day.